Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, we are all searching for ways to better evaluate players in order to give meaningful feedback. Over 15 years ago, I put together a test called the JAMODI Skill Rating. The JSR takes players through a series of tests involving basketball skill or athleticism, giving them one rating at the end. Their JSR rating will give you clarity on what needs to be discussed with players and parents on areas they need to focus on improving. I test our players at least 4 times each year. They're able to compete against each other, past players' scores, and most importantly, their past performances. If you'd like to start testing your athletes, email me at jamodipodcast@gmail.com for more information. Coach, we're going to talk about how you handle defeat with your team, which is kind of funny to talk about with somebody that's been 98-11 the last 3 years. I think I have that right. The first time you made the championship game and lost, what was that talk like with your team after the game?
So it was right. I mean, anytime the last loss of the season happens, right, there's like a feeling of just finality, right, that comes over you. And I think that's really where you get tested as a coach. And so, going into that game, it's crazy. We had an All-American point guard that him and I kind of got into it in the Final Four game in overtime. And I didn't play him in the national championship game.
Wow.
And so
talk about toughness.
Yeah, it's tough or dumb. I don't know which one. But no, for me though, like and he was a good kid, but like man, we had some kind of issues through the season. I just said, hey man, if this happens again, like you're not going to play, you're done. And so, but hey, looking back, like I made the decision that I did just because like I didn't want to have any regrets, right? And we probably weren't going to win that game without him, right? So we lost to Loyola from New Orleans. So they were actually in our conference. So we lost 6 games that year. 4 of them were to them, and I think 3 of those games we were up at halftime and, but they were just better than us.
Yeah.
But, it was obviously tough to get that far and to kind of walk away with what you feel like at the time is nothing. It's a hard feeling to kind of stomach.
But then you get there again the next year. And just getting there, to me, is an amazing accomplishment. Most coaches, I mean, I've been doing this 16 years. I've never made it to a championship game in TAPS or in UIL or anything. So a lot of us don't know what it's like to be there. If you don't mind kind of taking us into that locker room a little bit.
Yeah. So our last year at Talladega, like I said, we lost to Loyola. And then last year at Langston, we lost in the Sweet 16. And so 2 times in 3 years.
Oh, okay. So made it, took a year, made it again.
But, I think more than anything, right? Like, I think it's just very validating, right? Like, like as a young coach, I just thought, man, right? Like you said, like, man, if we could just, right, if we could ever win a national championship, make it to a national championship game, right? Like that's what we want. And then you get there and you're close and you lose, but you know how hard it is, right? Like you said, there's so many Hall of Fame coaches, so many coaches that are a lot better than me that right never sniff a national championship game. And so after the first time, I really struggled because I was like, man, the odds are that we'll never be back, right? Like it's hard. And I think so for us getting back there this year, I think it really validates, like in my mind, like what we do and I think how we do things, it works. At the NAI level, it translates to success. And, obviously, man, I'm hungry. I want to continue to work and get better. I know I have a lot of areas that I can continue to improve on. But, I do. I know we'll be back at some point, right? It might not be next year or the year after, but, I believe in the way we do things. I think, it lends itself to winning at a really high level. So, hope we get that chance again.
Yeah. And kind of forgetting about just those final games, after a win or a loss, and at any point throughout the season, what's your approach with your guys directly after or even going into the next day?
So winning to me, right? Like here's the thing. Like, I want to make losing absolutely miserable. So everyone in our program hates it. I want our assistant coaches to hate to lose. I want our players to really hate to lose. Like, I like, and people laugh, but I'm serious. I want it to be miserable. But to me, losing's not just losing a game. I think you can win a game by 35 points and lose. So we talk a lot about going 1-0 every day. And
Mm.
guys know, if that practice is not a win, like, man, we're either going to come back and do it over, or we're going to go twice the next day. And so, yeah, like, I think some of the maddest I got at our team this year was after, 25 or 30-point wins where I thought we had an 8 or 10 minute stretch where we just
Yeah.
didn't do what we should have done. And so, like, I don't think the scoreboard, just my opinion, right? Like, I don't think the scoreboard is always reflective of if you won that day or not. Like, man, are we getting better? Are we putting ourselves to be the best team that we can be in March? Forget what the scoreboard says, right? Like, I think if you have talent and you know who you are, then the scoreboard's going to take care of itself at the end of the day. But I
Yep.
think it's about that daily pursuit of excellence.
Are we getting better? I love the 1-0 mentality. And you're right. The scoreboard can lie. The scoreboard, if we lose a game, we can still be getting better, moving towards our goal. But to your point, the opposite's true. We can lose a game or win a game, but be moving farther away from where we want to be. Maybe that's a little bit of the art of coaching, or the feel, is that to know the difference between it. Because you can't, if you just turn a blind eye to getting better when you win, slippage happens. But then on the flip side, if you lose, but you're doing positive things, you can't be blind to that as well. So as a coach, how do you gain that feel to know when we won, but it's not actually where we want to be? We lost, but we're right where we want to be. How do you get that?
You know, I mean, I think that's right. Like, kind of where, like you said, like, talking about feel, right? Like, I feel like leadership is almost right. It's an art. It looks different for different people. It
Yeah.
sounds different for people. Like, I think it's really knowing, right? Like, your personnel, like, who they are as people, right? And figuring out how is it that you can, get the best out of them.
Yeah. I think you're right on the money. Know your team.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't know your team, and I don't like to think of what their ceiling is, but I think what all of us can finish seasons with a success, feeling like it was a success. And the way we do that is if we exceeded the potential, if we maxed out, or what Bonowitz says is gas out. Like, if our team gasses out at the very end of this season, then that's a win, no matter what that final game looked like. But I think it's right. Maybe time is what helps coaches know, feel, but ultimately, yeah, knowing your players, that's huge.
Yeah, for sure. And, like, when you talk about, right, like, maxing out a group, and this is something that we talked to our team about all year, was, man, when this is done, like, let's have no regrets, right?
Yeah.
And there's some things I know throughout the season. Obviously, I mean, I messed up, and like, from a basketball standpoint, or from, how I dealt with a certain guy. Like, man, there's definitely some things that I would go back and change. But I told this to our guys, and I really feel this. Like, I could not have cared anymore. I couldn't have worked any harder. There was, like, man, there was nothing more that I could have done from an effort standpoint, right? To put us in the best situation to be successful. And so, man, like, Luke, again, you talk about it, losing a national championship game. It's just devastating, man. It's hard, but, like, I know there's nothing more that I could have invested in our team this year to make the outcome any different.
That's awesome. Like, coach, right there. Like, that's the feeling I want to have every year. And my challenge to myself, but to any coach, is I think we can do that. Like, you can have a losing season, but still feel the same way that you felt. We lost our second round playoff game this year at home by 3. Man, we gassed out. I loved every second with this group. They gave me their very, very best. I don't think I could have given them any more. I think I love them fully. Like, that's a win. And so when you go to TABC and you ask coaches, how was your year? How cool would it be if all of us answered like that? Man, I couldn't give them anything else. It was great, regardless of or independent of the record.
Yeah, for sure. And like it's funny, like you talk about like right when you go to TABC or you go to these events and you see people, it's amazing because right this summer we're out recruiting, right? Every coach in America is going to be talking about how talented they are, right? But then, right, the guys that don't have good seasons, they're going to be talking about how soft they were. And so, like,
Just didn't have the shooters. Just didn't have the shooters. Yeah.
so I think again, I think that right there, like, just if you listen to coaches talk, like to me, it tells you what's important enough.
Right on the money. You can tell within a few seconds of I don't know. I hate to say like what kind of coach they are. It's because that's arrogant to say I know what kind of coach they are based on a statement, but maybe about culture, maybe
For sure.
about extreme ownership. Like what's his name? Jocko talks about whatever happens in our program, good or bad, man, it's my fault. Like it's my fault. And so after the season, this wasn't one of our strongest shooting teams as far as faith. Like we still shot a ton, but we don't typically care about percentage very much. But it was a low shooting year, man. Ultimately, that's my fault. Like didn't spend enough time focusing on not just their shot prep, but maybe what misses meant to them. But my point is like I think when we talk to other coaches, if the goal for all of us needs to be what you said and not being fake about it, like but truly feeling that.
Yeah, and because I think coaching's hard, man. As obviously as everyone out here watching, right? Like it doesn't matter what level, like right, coaching is hard.
If
Trying
coaching
to
was easy, there'd be no reason for this talk, right? Like no reason to learn, no reason to stretch, nothing gnawing at us that like, golly, how do I get better for my team? Sorry, go ahead.
no, absolutely right, and I think that's the beauty of coaching. It doesn't matter what level you're at, like what your track record is. You can always improve and you can always get better. I know that I have. I think I've been coaching college basketball 21 years now, but
Wow.
I lot to learn.
And that growth mindset, that's really impressive. Like I hope I never want to lose that. And to hear somebody like has been doing it at such a high level for so long and that you still are trying to improve and get better, like to me, that's inspiring. Like the moment that I feel like I got to figure it out, be careful. Like slippage is about to happen.
Yeah, I think, and I tell our guys this all the time. I think one of the greatest things about the game of basketball, it's very humble. I think the second that you think that you have it figured out, that you have all the answers, like, man, you're in for a rude awakening. And so I think that's one of the greatest life lessons too that guys can learn, through the sport.
I don't wish a losing season on anybody, but it is, especially for a younger coach, possibly one of the best things that can happen to you when you look back over your career. In the moment, it sucks. So, inherited a really good team here at Faith, and we took a style that me and Wes Watson were doing at McKinney High School with those athletes, and I brought it to 5A Taps, and we did the same thing, and they just ran with it. It had a lot of fun. And then I thought, Coach, you know what? It's me. It's the system, and I can do this with anybody. Doesn't matter the talent. Doesn't matter losing season, second year here, no playoffs, humbling, like back to the drawing board. Chris Hill had a great point. He said every year you have to start over as if it's not just brand new, but be careful of carrying over things from last season because what happened then in that team might not work here. But if you think I'll just rinse and repeat, you can fall into that trap of thinking that it's me, it's system, and it's not these sets of players in this circumstance, and figuring out what works best for them, right?
Man, that is very well said. Like so for us this year, again, so in year one here, right, we go 31-3, and then man, we have a lot of guys back, but and we signed some really talented guys. But our first 5 games of the season, we were 5-0, but we were terrible, right, in all 5 games. And so, man, I'm like, extremely concerned. And, you're thinking as a coach, man, this is the same way that we taught everything last year. It's the same way we did everything last year. But, right, like to your point, what last year has nothing to do with this year. And it's figuring out a new group. It's figuring out, right, how to get your message across. And, yeah, I think that's a challenge and kind of fun of coaching.
No doubt. It's the fun. But then the balance of, we still have our personality, our identity, maybe a way of playing that just rings true to us. We don't want to just abandon that every year, depending on. So figuring out what adjustments we can make to make the style that we love or identity work for this group of players. I think there's a little bit of maybe the art or magic in that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, we talked about identity, right? So it's not losing your identity or what it is that you believe in, but it's altering sometimes how you get that across and how you hold guys accountable. And so I think it is a delicate balance.
You mentioned I want to backtrack a little bit. You said you get upset if the practice isn't a win, and I just wrote that down. In your opinion, like, how do you define what makes a practice a win?
I think having obviously everyone engaged in practice. Like we talk a lot about, right, our attitude and our effort. Right? Is our attitude perfect? Is our effort perfect? Right? We know you're not going to have a perfect practice, but I think if you have 18 guys that are there, that are present, that are working to get better, right? That's the start of it. And so I think if your attitude and your effort are good, right, like that for that day, it's a win, and there's a great chance that you got better.
Love that. This is a question that not many coaches choose, so I can't wait to hear, what's a rule change that you would want and why?
So I'm going to think not just like during the course of the game, right? And I'm sure a lot of people aren't going to like this, but I think what I would change is, like you're going to see guys now play 4 years at 4 different places. Like, like what are we teaching kids? Like, I think, and hey, I think that there's some situations where kids should be allowed to transfer and leave and play right away? Absolutely. Right. Like, hey, if their coach leaves, I mean, I think that's right at the college level. That's a big deal. But, man, like what were we teaching? Right. So, and you hear so many coaches like Hall of Fame coaches have got out of coaching because they don't feel like they can coach guys. Well, I might coach this guy hard and man, like he doesn't like it. So we're going to go to school 3 in 3 years. Right.
Yeah.
And so I just think that, man, I feel like we're really doing kids an injustice, allowing that. And I mean, I believe that with all my heart. I think it's really soft. I mean, we're teaching kids that your decisions have no consequences. You know what? Yeah, you're 18 years old, or maybe you're a JUCO guy, you're 20, 21 years old, but like, yeah, where you decide to go to school, it matters, right? It's just like in life, who you decide to marry, right? It matters. Like what you decide to do with your career, it matters. And
Yeah.
so I would really, really like to see, that change for sure.
Okay. I'm going to push a little hard. What's the change? Like what, if you were the one making the rule, what do you think it needs to be?
I don't think right rules are ever perfect, and there is a need to adapt. But I don't know what was wrong with the current system, right? Like, I mean, if you look at the Division I level, if you transfer, you're going to sit a year, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I mean, and it's crazy now. Like so many conferences, right? You can transfer in conference and go play right away. Like it's mind boggling to me,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't get it. And so, I mean, I don't know that I have right exactly what the solution is, but this isn't it.
And I appreciate your perspective on that, because you are somebody that takes in a lot of transfers and you're open and honest about that. But you see that obviously there's a need to transfer at certain times, but there's a way that it could be done, or I guess controlled is maybe a better way of looking at it, that doesn't set up this unrealistic expectation that I think it's creating in these kids, which is I want, I get. Sometimes there's rules. I think it's a good point of view, especially for you because of the way that you use transfers.
Yeah, and I think right, and shoot, I sometimes going through a process where you have to grow is not fun, right? It's not. But and we talk all the time with our guys about how we can't skip the process, right? The process is there, right? For a reason. It's what gets you to your desired result. And yeah, I just feel like, man, letting guys play at 4 different places in 4 years, there's no process to it. Man, I'm not getting the playing time I want in year one. Okay, I'm out.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever the case may be. And so but again, I think, right, sport is always a reflection of society. And I think we live in a really soft society right now.
Yeah. We're taking the brick walls out of our lives. I mean, even as adults, we try to eliminate as many brick walls as we can. And Randy Pausch, in the last lecture, back in my teaching days, we used to watch that last lecture that he did. It's just really good. But he said brick walls are there for us to figure out how badly we want something. And these brick walls are being taken away, from these guys. Mike, I think his name was Mike Sweeney, the former football coach at Wheaton. I was listening to a podcast he did years ago, and he said, we've got to be careful with the way that people say they're being called to do something else. I'm being called to go to another school. I'm being called to be in another relationship, being called. Maybe God's not calling you to go somewhere else. Maybe he's calling you to dig in and learn to have some resolve and to fight through something.
And I think about this, right? If your actions don't ever have consequences, how can you really learn and grow? And I look at that with us, right? Again, we just lose in the national championship game. Man, it's caused me to really have to, really look at myself and how can I get a lot better? And if we had won that, would I be looking at myself the same way? I don't think I would. And so, so sometimes I think, right, we grow the most when the things are the hardest.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.